Good evening, students. This is Professor Page. Tonight we're going to be talking about deviance, obedience, conformity, and authority. In 1963, Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram placed an ad in the newspaper to get volunteers for his now infamous Obedience to Authority study. It was advertised as a study of memory, and participants were offered $4 an hour for their time. At this time in history, Nazi war criminals were being tried in Nuremberg for the atrocities they committed in the deaths of millions of Jews in concentration camps during the Holocaust. When Milgram heard their defense, quote, "I was simply following orders," it made him wonder about the power of authority and obedience, which gave him the idea for this experiment. Participants believed they were testing memory in their subjects. So I have a question for you. If a person in a position of authority ordered you to administer an electrical shock of 400 volts to another person, would you do it? I'd like to think I wouldn't. And I'm pretty sure that you feel the same way about yourself. But as it turned out, 65% of the participants delivered the maximum shock of 400 volts. Now, none of the individuals was really shocked. The volunteers became the teachers, and the subjects were really employees of the school who were in on the experiment. Each teacher was asked to sit in front of what was supposed to be a shock generator, which was pretty scary looking. And this shock generator went from 30 volts all the way up to 450 volts in increments of 15 volts. There were labels to make it more scary, starting with slight shock, moderate shock, danger, severe shock, and then the last two highest shocks just had 3 big red X's. Each teacher was told to administer a stronger shock to the student for each incorrect answer he or she gave. The students could yell, beg for the experiment to stop, cry that they had heart conditions, and some just went silent. So there was no knowing if they had passed out, if they were dead. Despite all of this, 65% of the teachers delivered the maximum shock to the students' quote subjects. Now, were they sadistic? Were they deviant? No. People shifted their individual responsibility to an authority figure. And in doing so, they just thought that they were doing their duty. Again, were they deviants who enjoyed hurting people? That's a question. When people shift that responsibility to an authority figure, it takes the onus or the blame off them. They were obeying the experimenter in this case, the perceived authority figure, who was actually another employee who was wearing a white coat. The symbol of the white coat for these participants made this person, in their eyes, an expert, someone who was to be obeyed, an authority figure. The only responses that this experimenter was allowed to give, if any of the teachers wanted to stop, wanted to go and check on the student, or expressed any concern or nervousness about continuing, the only responses were, 1, please continue. Then 2, the experiment requires you to continue. 3, it is absolutely essential that you continue. And 4, you have no choice. You must continue. You must go on. Afterwards, when they were debriefed, a lot of the teachers stated that as long as the experimenter, the authority figure, was responsible for any harm, any problems, any negative outcomes of these shocks, they were fine with continuing. They also said they were merely doing what they were told. In other words, following orders. This is troubling and enlightening at the same time. And in fact, replications of this study have yielded the same results. Think about this. Deviance is described as nonconformity to norms, values, expectations, while the deviant is described as someone whose behavior is outside of moral standards. So we can say that deviance is socially constructed. As a society, we employ methods of social control. Milgram made the distinction between 2 of these levels of social control, conformity and obedience. People shift personal responsibility to the authority figure and again conclude that they're just doing their duty. We'll continue this discussion as we explore ideas like, is there good deviance or bad conformity? Be back in a couple of days. If you have any questions about any of the material we covered this evening, please feel free to reach out to me. Good night.